Hello, and welcome to another fully live episode of. Oh, wait, those are pumpkin legs. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another fully live episode of Hacking with Friends, where I've ruined the first thing I wanted to surprise you with, my favorite thing about Halloween. But I am live here with Killian today, and yeah, we're going to go over the hacking news. Killian, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me back again. I'm looking forward to it because we weren't on last week, so I've been missing out. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah. Well, Halloween is my favorite season, so I've been talking a lot about that as we go into it. I've had a couple kind of fun projects going on, and one that I'm actually doing tomorrow that I'm kind of excited about is these LED light boxes. So you kind of can't see this one too well with my. Let's see there. I'm gonna turn my light off, and it's gonna make me look like an anonymous witness, like testifying. There we go. But as you
I
can see,
I
these
like it.
light
I like the mood
boxes.
lighting real quick.
Yeah, so I can like change the like pattern on this according to like this little app that I have that is yeah, pretty cool. So um overall, wait, of course now it's not shutting on. Overall, it's going to be a fun project that allows me to teach a bunch of people how to get started with oh, of course now it's working. How to get started with electronics. So okay, wait, now it's working. Now I want to show it. There we go. So
Ooh,
yeah.
that's
Um
cool.
we have a couple shades that are a little bit more transparent and kind of like show the light a bit better, but I'm going to be doing this at the Missoula Library Makerspace no, yes, tomorrow on Saturday. Wow. Okay.
Well,
So that's going to be really cool. I get to teach people about how like these IoT devices work. They're going to get to 3D print some stuff, and they're going to get to customize their own version of this thing, which of course could also just be put inside a pumpkin. So I'm going
yeah.
to be kind of pushing that agenda as well. If they forgot to 3D print the case, they can always just, get a Ziploc bag and stick this inside their pumpkin instead. So kind of a fun Halloween project I've got going on, as well as, I don't know if I got to show you these other things I've been working on, this giant ziggurat, which is a
Ooh.
capacitive touch synthesizer, and then a pumpkin that yells at you if you take candy out of the bowl. Which I 3D printed a giant Terminator skull and have that kind of like
Nice.
hanging out on top of a pumpkin. And the idea is when people put their hand in the bowl, the capacitive sensor senses it, and then the
Mm.
pumpkin starts yelling at them, or the Terminator. Um, so I also really like having my pumpkins look a little intimidating, like add a little
Mhm.
something extra. And with the 3D printer, I'll reveal them again. One of my favorite things has been this. Uh,
Ooh.
these are pumpkin legs, and the look that they achieve is phenomenal. So if you are looking for like projects that are kind of fun for Halloween, this one is one of one of my favorites. It makes the pumpkins look so incredibly weird. Um, Relatively easy to do. You can get them on Thingiverse, and then the finished result, yes.
I love it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's somewhere between like duck feet and like dog feet, and they end up
Mhm.
kind of looking well, it depends on which one you put them on. The oblong ones really look truly great, but you're looking for some fun 3D printing projects. This is part of my whole. You can see the Terminator skull lurking behind it. I haven't
Ah,
spray
yeah.
painted it silver yet, but soon it's going to be quite the sight. So we need a spider version of those legs. Oh my god. Actually, there are a
Oh.
spider version of those legs. I actually saw them on Thingiverse. So
Ooh.
don't worry. If you've thought it, someone on Thingiverse has probably made it. So if you wanted to put legs into the side of the pumpkin so it's standing like that, it does actually have those. I was just a little scared that like a really big pumpkin like wouldn't be able
Mm.
to like support the weight because I'm dealing with some big like really big fat pumpkins. But yeah, if you want to make a spider pumpkin, there's actually those legs too. So whatever legs you can imagine, there's probably already those on Thingiverse. And if you have a makerspace nearby, like I do, you can always print them there without needing to have your own printer. So kind of and these print in like I would say like 40 minutes or so to get a set of pumpkin legs. So overall, a very fun project.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna have to look this up. Like this might be the thing that puts me over the edge to 3D printing.
Yes, sorry. I hate that I ruined the surprise of like one of my favorite parts of Halloween, which is not pumpkin spice season, it is pumpkin leg season. And that
Mhm.
is that is really what I've been looking forward to. So putting as many legs on as many pumpkins as possible, I think is key to like standing out from your neighbors who just have regular old pumpkins just sitting there. And then also as the pumpkins get old and rubbery and start to like sag and stuff, I feel like it represents all types of pumpkin body shapes, and that's truly beautiful. All right, so other things going on. I just want wanted to give a shout out to the people in our Discord server. They often make some really cool and interesting stuff and share it with our community. And one of those was their own Hackcat. So this is like a hot swappable nugget. So this also was, I believe, a project that they created on their own. Like they didn't like buy like a completed kit. They actually made their own PCB from the files and then went ahead and made it so that they could get as much use out of it as possible. So actually, let's see. Oh, never mind. Sorry. There, you can hot swap them, but it looks like they made one USB nugget and one Wi-Fi nugget. And what I like actually about this project, now that I remember it, since it's been a minute since I looked at it, was that it's actually a USB Type C ESP8266 board. And this is a D1 Mini, and I've tried to put these on the newer version that takes USB-C on the products that I sell like over on the side for just open source stuff, but I've had really bad luck with it. Like it just they don't seem to flash very well, and like I've kind of been resigned to the fact that I have to keep dealing with like micro USB, which everybody hates. So in this case, it's cool to see somebody both making the forbidden red nugget case, which is something that usually means it's like a prototype and it like doesn't go out of the developer's hands. 3D printing their own case, being able to make their own, and then like try out new modules that I haven't really gotten a chance to like interact with yet. So yeah, sorry. We also made a video about hot swapping these. So I think that's why I remembered slightly wrong on that, but still very cool to see these kind of do-it-yourself PCB projects based on open source files. So anybody can go out there and do this. This is why this was made open source in the first place. Like it's obviously expensive to ship to Australia, and like being able to make your own for relatively low cost. I guess the cost here is like your own sanity, because you have to like wait for the modules to come in, and if they don't work, then you have to go back to scratch. So you find that you actually end up buying like multiples of everything just in case one thing doesn't work and you have to wait even longer, and it takes like weeks. So that's why I have to say I admire this person's persistence, having made this myself from scratch without having done it many times. There's a lot of things you can do wrong to ruin one of these, and like we did our best to make it so anybody can build one, but frankly it's a frustrating process sometimes, especially when you make like a limited amount of like printed circuit boards, and then you mess up the first 3 of them by accident, and you're like, oh my gosh, I only have 2 left. Like I really need to get this right now. So really cool to see the finished design is very neat looking. All right, so that's about all I have before we go into the news, and a lot of stuff has happened. Oh my gosh, I don't want to talk about that one first. That one's there's a lot of stuff going on. But I wanted to touch on something that I first found on TikTok, because now apparently like a TikTok post is like worth creating an entire story against about. This is something where a limited number, but still a substantial amount of Starbucks were continuously playing Ed Sheeran no matter what anybody did. I was just like mentioning that I was seeing these videos and people's replies on the last, I think, Q&A stream. But this is confirmed that there is a network of baristas who are suffering under basically like instead of holiday music, just a single artist over and over and over. So apparently there's some sort of collaboration with Ed Sheeran where it may have gone too far, and they tried to encourage the playlist to mix him in a lot, but instead it's like mixing him in like every song. But yeah, thought it might have been a cyber attack, but nope, it is just maybe a runaway algorithm suggesting one artist, to the point that mental health is being affected here when it comes to baristas who are on their like 6th shift in a row and just listening to nothing else. All right. I also wanted to propose a new game, Kilian.
Okay.
Have you ever looked at the art in a restaurant and thought like, I would love to like recreate that, but like with a little twist?
Yeah. There's a whole genre of this. I love that, like where they paint people or things into other pictures.
Yeah, exactly. And like what I find interesting is like it's very challenging to look at something and then go to like Bing Image Creator and get it to look like really similar. So this is an example of just a portrait that I saw while I was out the other night. It's like a splash of wine that's like becoming like a woman in a red dress, and she's also got a wine glass, and I can't really tell if that's like a microphone or not, or if it's like another wine glass. It's kind of, it's very abstract, but you can see it's like an oil painting. It's got like a palette knife effect on the back, like, and there's like a gradient here. It's like there's a lot to kind of communicate. So I decided to set out with some friends and using Bing's free image creator, see who could get an image closest to the style while inserting a new character. One of them was just like making the same
Okay.
image, but the wine is the lady. So instead of
Okay.
making her a splash of wine, she's just that. The second was Gritty.
Gritty,
You know,
yes.
Gritty, the mascot. And then the third one was a minion. And I think this is perhaps
Okay.
the most theatrical and what really captured the essence of the portrait. But getting to see how quickly you can look at something in real life and then recreate the look, feel, and style while maybe altering a couple things. I'm not going to say this is 100% spot on, but I will say that for anybody who's trying to recreate something, let's say I could apply this to a phishing page as well. You know, if I'm describing how a website looks and feels as something to an AI in order to create a similar looking set of graphics, or like a phishing page that looks really similar without directly copying, this means that you don't need a graphic designer anymore. You can really like emulate the style of something or the look of something with free tools. So kind of fun as a game amongst friends to see who can like get a style as similar as possible to a piece of art out there. But the practical application of this is it's getting easier and easier for anybody to mimic something, to mimic a style or create something that fits in amongst other things. And that's going to be an increasing problem. You know, on the cybersecurity front, when it comes to things that used to be expensive or difficult or would require like a creative team, now somebody can over dinner create multiple versions of something and pick the one that looks best. And that's going to make it, just easier for people who previously were limited on maybe the graphic design front. So,
AI is getting, I mean, it's crazy. And I keep seeing more and more stories warning about the misuse of it. I want to say it was maybe British intelligence this week has warned that it's becoming increasingly popular for misuse and spreading disinformation and even creating like terrorist propaganda material and things like that. So the future is now, and it's a little bit scary.
Yeah, and of course, this is like a very mild version of you know what you're talking about. But like, imagine if these were photographs of something very controversial, like something where previously people would use a photograph of like an old event and try to pass it off as a new one. But now they can just create stuff, you know. And I'm not going to say any of these are photorealistic, but you can make things that look pretty realistic with some of these new tools. Like, so for the open source ones or ones you can run by yourself or for free, it's certainly possible to be able to create these things that would spread on social media and look relatively good. So again, for mimicking a look, a feel, for being able to pass something off as looking like something else. What's interesting is, and I've talked about this before, is being able to create a feedback loop where you use Bing to upload an image and have it analyzed by the AI, and it describes it to you. And then you take that description and feed it into Bing Image Creator, and you create a feedback loop between the two, where you say you're basically able to refine how the generated image looks. So really basic feedback loops like that are how you're going to be able to get really good fakes in the future. So of course, this is just minions and gritty, but I wanted to illustrate the point that this is now free to you know, arbitrarily like copy something or rip something off or make something that looks pretty good. And for something that's going to spread quickly on social media, this is where it's going to come from, I feel like, in the future.
Yeah, scary stuff.
All right, so this is Kilian, I didn't send this over when I sent you all the stuff we're going to talk about. So this was just something that I saw on Mastodon, and I was interested just because there are always, you know, there's talk about like how surveillance works and what like a lawful court order versus like getting hacked would look like. And in this case, this was somebody going through and investigating a lawful, what seems to be a lawful interception of a Russian Jabber messaging service node in Germany.
Interesting.
So it goes through the whole process, and this is like very like understandable for beginners. If you're interested, I'll drop this in the links that we put out under the video this week. But this is just like how the administrators of this server were able to figure out that something was wrong. And this is actually what happened. One of the certs on the monitoring server expired and caused an error. So they were like, they went in trying to fix their server, and they found evidence of like a TLS server or some sort of like authenticator that was not affiliated with their system that was still getting flagged as being invalid along the way. So there was some piece of networking equipment along the pipeline to their server that was not intentionally there and had an error that they couldn't resolve, obviously, because they didn't own the equipment. So Going through here, you can see how they identified where the error was coming from and then spotted the strange network configuration that talks about maybe being a police intercept or something where the telecommunications company deliberately routed traffic through this interception device.
Right.
So this is kind of a case study for anybody who's wondered, like, hey, like, what would that sort of lawful interception look like if the telecommunications company was ordered,
Mhm.
to start listing in on a particular server, in this case, like a Russian-speaking Jabber server within Germany? Then, what would that look like? These are kind of the steps you would go through in order to identify and track that down. The problem being, if everything's working correctly, they might not have noticed this in the first place. So
Right.
a lot of what happened here is like them noticing a problem, going in, and then finding signs of the interception. Whereas under normal circumstances, those would be really, really difficult to detect
Mhm.
unless you were super paranoid and knew where to look.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. So I just read through this relatively quickly, but the technical details were what was really interesting here.
Yeah, I'll have to read that afterwards because I would love to get into that a little bit more.
Yeah. All right, we have so much to go. All
We
right,
do.
so let's talk about Ragnar Locker being
Mhm.
taken down in the international sting. So this was something that we had been talking about a while ago. I believe
Yeah,
that they were particularly interested in critical infrastructure, right?
I believe that was them. Yeah, I've read a lot about them lately. They seem to be pretty top in the news. Probably why they got targeted and taken down.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a reason why a lot of ransomware gangs
Mhm.
stick to certain non-infrastructure type targets, because if you go after
Right.
hospitals, if you go after like government infrastructure or like power, water, like you tend to have the full weight of the government come after you
Right.
relatively quickly. And yes, 10 critical infrastructure sectors such as manufacturing,
Yeah.
energy, and government, that is absolutely going to get you some heat. So
Mhm.
the big debate about these ransomware gangs is sometimes they choose to be very picky about their targets, and like they'll breach people and either not go after them or demand something very minimal just because they realize that this isn't an ideal target. They'll even have like analysts that are working with them to go through the financials of a company they get access to determine, is this someone we should breach? Is this should we take the next step
Right.
and even like kick this off? So if you don't have that kind of judgment as a ransomware gang, the problem is you tend to draw a lot of heat when you hit the wrong target. So for critical infrastructure, if they don't pay and the infrastructure stays down, that's a ton of damage and a
Yeah.
ton of people affected, and it's going to get you a lot of attention. I believe that also it was reported that this was a semi-private group, and
Yeah.
within these ransomware gangs, like it's often in their best interest if they can to be have affiliates and other people
Mhm.
who would take the heat if they hit the wrong target. By being a
Mhm.
private group, you're kind of in some ways like you're increasing the profits, but you're
Right.
also concentrating the liability. And that may have been one of the factors here between hitting critical infrastructure and not having affiliates to take the fall for you.
Mhm.
Like it means that you're making more money, but it also means that you are the only people responsible for these attacks.
Yeah.
And so that's so far. It seems like there was a person arrested in Paris, and there was simultaneous raids by Italy's police department and also in Ukraine. So yeah, an 11-country operation to take
Yeah, it's a
down
big one.
this network. But overall, like this is we kind of expected to see this once they popped up in the news for hitting these critical infrastructure groups.
Right.
That these are really the groups that the government is allocating substantial resources towards. And as a ransomware operator, if you've got a bunch of affiliates working with you, if you are avoiding like certain things that get a lot of heat, you can really get away with a lot before you get
Sure.
taken down. It's really the ones that I see that are going after just egregious targets that really like anger people and cause a lot of
Mhm.
disproportionate damage that we tend to see getting taken down. Like I don't think that the federal government is going to go after like the somebody who like takes down like a casino versus someone who takes down like a power grid.
Right.
The priorities are just different.
Yeah, I mean, it's private business versus national security concerns. Um,
Exactly.
not
Exactly.
that the FBI and the federal government won't investigate, but there's a disproportionate amount of potential, liability or lives lost. Even.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so moving on to some good news. We were talking, was it last year? Was it the year before about Apple's proposition to fight the spread of prohibited images of all sorts by doing client-side scanning. So the
Yes.
idea of this
Mhm.
and the rallying cry behind this is child safety and being able to automatically detect like child abuse imagery. However, there were so many concerns here. For one, the fact that it could be changed at a moment's notice to scan for things other than what was intended. You could have
Mhm.
it looking for political communication. You
Right.
could have it looking for basically anything you want on a device, and it completely sidesteps encryption and makes it so that there's a process for being able to search someone's device without any sort of like consent.
Right.
Um, and be able to look through it and arbitrarily add things to this list of stuff you're looking for. There's also
Mhm.
cases of like, people transmitting images of their own children to like a doctor and having that image be enough to trigger an investigation and have somebody have their house get raided or something like that. So there was
Mhm.
so many concerns here that it ultimately died. In
Right.
Europe, however, this has been kept alive and well with something a lot of people are calling chat control. So this is proposing like a legal obligation for client-side scanning so that everything going through your device, your computer, your phone, whatever, even if it arrives in an encrypted state, it is scanned by the operating system and law enforcement or some other group is contacted if something is found on your computer that's not supposed to be there. So this kind of invasive, like bringing the government into your
Mhm.
computer, is really frightening to a lot of people because
Yeah.
having the ability to have their device rat them out for something that's a false positive is a huge concern, and also not something a lot of people want to give the government power over if they were to
Right.
suddenly change their stance on what is permissible. Obviously, with what happens with what's happened in the past with the National Security Agency, like finding creative ways of spying, like introducing the ability to arbitrarily rifle around a user's device through their encrypted stuff and end run around encryption is exactly what those kind of
Right.
agencies might use in the future if they got authorization to do so in secret. So a lot of people have kind of seen the writing on the wall and they've opposed this legislation. And fortunately, this has been opposed yet again, and seems as though it is going to need to go through more process before being considered. Um, yeah, as somebody who values privacy and doesn't like the thought of being able to get around some of the best
Mhm.
protection that we have to prevent snooping, like I think this is a hacker's dream. Like being able to get access to like the daemon that does like client side scanning and like
Right.
either adding things to it, modifying it, changing it, like that is truly interesting to me. So, and I can
Right.
imagine that's going to be interesting to governments and also like APT threats. So,
Mhm.
yeah, getting around encryption is not a good case, and I don't think a lot of people find that it's warranted to
Right.
search every person's device because you're worried about like a certain kind of like image being distributed. The slippery slope to looking for any kind of image or
Mhm.
false positives has been consistently too much to really justify this, at least in the United States. So seeing a similar stance in Europe has been encouraging. Even if the bill is not completely dead, it does seem that there's enough opposition that the decision has been postponed.
Right. I mean, even in terms of like the business world, we see it so often that people will go into like a DLP type of project. And what they'll quickly realize is they either can never implement like the blocking or any of the other controls. Or if you think about like IDS versus IPS, it's nobody ever makes that transition because of the false positive rate, because of the you know ruining business or accidentally blocking something. Now think about that on a global scale, not even for threats, about potentially anything. It's terrifying to see, and kind of if you put it in business terms, business is mostly never gonna move down that path. And we're considering it at the individual level, this level of like invasive control and access. The false positives is just staggering, right?
Yeah,
For even like for common or known stuff. Imagine the fuzzy logic needed for image identification and things. And I know the counter argument is AI is getting better, blah blah blah, but it's just eh, it's dystopian.
yeah, I'm really encouraged to see that this bill hasn't gained too much traction because
Hmm.
I've been tracking it now for a while, and like it really does have some pretty chilling implications for fundamental right to privacy on a device that you own. If it's mandated that a device that you own like is also like scanning everything and reporting back, it's really frightening because at a
Hmm.
certain point you don't really own that device, and it
Right.
does it does have like its own obligation to like report you,
Mhm.
even if it is a false positive. That's something that's frightening to a lot of users. So knowing that your phone is constantly on the verge of reporting you to the police, like that's not a very comforting thing for a lot of people, especially if they don't have a lot of confidence in the technology.
Yeah, and I mean, the other argument you'll probably hear about people's, "Well, if you're not doing anything wrong, you don't have anything to worry about," and that's not the point.
Exactly. Well,
Right.
yeah, and like we already have examples of people who are not doing anything wrong and have their whole life upended. Like,
Mhm.
they get like arrested at like work or something,
Right.
and then they find out that it's like a communication to a doctor from their
Mhm.
own child. It's like that's just one of the examples of false positives that have happened. I just like as somebody who watched like millions of sand dunes get censored by AI. I just don't think that it's that good at
Mhm.
like detecting these things sometimes, and that there are problems that also lie in
Mhm.
like who has the power to add or subtract things to this list. Is it a government agency? If
Right.
it's not, like the big problem in the United States was also it was like a non-governmental agency with like
Right.
unclear oversight that was going to like be the ones like in charge of the list that people have their phones like ramsackled for. So it just seemed like lots of weird questions needed to be asked that nobody quite had good answers for at the time that this was being proposed in the United States.
Yeah, and I mean that's exactly, a lot of times it is done sort of by unelected individuals who are not necessarily, kind of, at least in the United States, to Congress or something else where you can petition your representatives to look at this. It's often done, in a black box for the public, and that's certainly not going to work. That's not how this
Yeah,
country was built.
yeah. Good afternoon, Tai Quang Gong. All right. So moving right along, we also have over 40,000, sorry, Cisco iOS XE devices. These are
Mhm.
networking devices. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know what those are specifically, but Cisco networking devices infected with a backdoor using a 0-day. This looks like an APT group. So far, people believe that it is a single group that is responsible for this,
Mhm.
and there is no patch or workaround
Yeah.
available. Recommendation: disable the HTTP server on all internet-facing systems. That's one short step away from unplug the
Right.
device and wait for further guidance. Um, what's going on here? All right, so we have an actively exploited, like very very serious CVE. This one right here. What's the score on this one? Does it say?
I don't remember seeing it. If
It
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 did say.
also yeah, it might also have it already does have a lot of like details like
Mhm.
redacted just because of the fact that there's no patch available. So
Mhm.
far it seems like there's limited exploitation. There doesn't seem to be a proof of concept that's in the wild. It seems to be a single group, but that group is having a field day,
Mhm.
and is infecting backdooring a lot of these devices. So far it looks like the activity here is just some basic like surveillance. So they're profiling devices, they're like assessing them, and nothing has actually been launched yet. However, of course, this is going to be a takeoff point for lateral movement across networks. Often, if there's any chainable vulnerabilities with other devices on the network, you're going to see further exploitation after an initial access and scan. So, yeah, the distribution here is pretty large, but it seems mostly centered around the United States. Um, yeah, wow. So this is something we're definitely going to see some follow up on as these devices are already exploited. We'll probably be talking about this next week in terms of what the follow up action from
Mhm.
the threat actor was, but it also appears to be persistent through a reboot. So even
Yeah.
sometimes this stuff is like just in memory or whatever, and you can just reboot it and it goes away, and that's how it stays stealthy. But they had been leveraging it from September 28th.
Wow.
Uh, to create high privilege accounts on affected hosts and take full control of the device. At that point, like, it's really, really difficult to get somebody out once they have full control of the
Right.
device. So, yeah, again, researchers believe this is one threat actor, but as soon as a proof of concept gets out here, or as soon as more is known about the way that the initial access is being achieved, you can expect that this is going to expand. There are a lot of vulnerable devices still out
Mhm.
there. All right, next up. Okta is saying that their support system was breached using stolen credentials. Now, the high level of this is not like the way you log into Okta. It's not like production stuff.
Right.
It is support stuff. And unfortunately, that can contain cookies and session tokens that were uploaded by users who needed support. So if you
Mhm.
were contacting your support and you were uploading like troubleshooting stuff, you were supposed to, quote, sanitize these files. However, a lot of people don't know how to do this, especially if
Right.
they're having problems. They're not going to go through that step, so they're just going to upload the full credentials. So this is problematic because a couple of people's cases were accessed. Session tokens and cookies were probably exposed in this attack. So that could potentially allow someone to like log into a set of applications posing as the person with the session cookie.
Mhm.
I don't know how straightforward that would be because I'm not totally sure what kind of secondary checks Okta might do. However, this definitely presents a threat. So
Mhm.
Okta's had multiple security incidents in the last couple of years, and their guidance here was, again, to sanitize the HAR files, which is a format I don't even know what it is. So if I was sharing
Yeah.
these files, I wouldn't know how to sanitize them. I'm going to have to Google that later. But
This the interesting thing with this is we're starting to see this a lot more, um, from a number of different places. I've had a number of conversations where in cases where you have like a form or something where free text, people will put in all sorts of stuff. And what that ends up doing is, and we've seen it in practice, is that it puts databases you wouldn't expect into scope for needing protection, where it's supposed to be some type of, you know, not really important communication, but next thing you know, credentials are in there, keys and tokens are in there. We've seen it kind of a ton, and it's really interesting with the easy proliferation of like cloud databases. You can spin up an RDS database and have a little web form, and it happens all the time. Um,
mm,
People doing it like a little shadow IT stuff, or hey, we need to do this quick dev. You never anticipate it, but that's just the nature of the way the cloud works now.
uh, from James, have you tried powering it off? Customer, yes, I powered it off and back on again. No, just power it off. Yeah, that's we're one step away from that with the Cisco thing. Yes, and absolutely. I find that these sorts of support portals are often like third-party things or other
Mhm.
things that are just don't have as much attention paid as like the main portal. And if customers are offering up sensitive details to your customer support, then that actually might be the weakest link when people are trying to find ways to get these sorts
Mhm.
of like session tokens, sorry, or
Right.
credentials. All right. Next up, 23andMe. We are talking about the data breach still, and on breach forums, they are currently leaking a lot of information about people's genetic profiles, and this includes the rich, the famous, and people who are definitely going to be litigious. So 23andMe is now probably regretting some of the very permissive settings that users were allowed to opt into.
Mhm.
While it makes it great for them because they can use the data for all sorts of stuff, it also means that anybody getting access to some of these poorly secured accounts is able to pull down the genetic profiles of lots and lots of people who have similarly opted in. So all these people basically agree to share genetic profile data with each other, and hackers were able to exploit this to pull down huge amounts of information. Think of like when Facebook was like allowing you to pull in like friends' profile
Right.
information, and like that one app was able to do all that. That's kind of like what hackers managed to
Right.
do here by logging into different profiles and taking advantage of opt-in settings that allowed them to access other users.
Yep.
So while this isn't like a wholesale breach, this is definitely a problem when it comes to the way that users were able to pull in data. So of course we talk about this all the time, how like there are lots of permissions set that make it so
Sure.
one user getting hit actually means a bunch of users might end up getting hit because that one user has access to so much stuff. This was something that was great for the company, but unfortunately not great for all the people who had opted into these services because it meant that other people opted into the same service were able to pull in their data and have it included in this breach. So there are lots and lots of people included in this. Let's see. 23andMe spokesperson said the attackers initially gained unauthorized access to a small number of accounts. So again, this is not something that
Sure.
affects their entire database, but eventually exfiltrated the data of a larger yet unidentified number of clients due to them activating an optional feature named DNA relatives, which connects genetic relatives. So what you can kind of see here is individual people being hit, but then having all of their relatives pulled in
Right.
via this feature. So the fact that you could like match with people
Right.
genetically actually means that by giving them that level of trust, if anybody in that genetic network gets breached, then everybody in that genetic
Mhm.
network gets their data scraped. Um, Kind of scary,
Yeah.
kind of frightening. So obviously, a lot of people were less than thrilled about this, and there are numerous lawsuits being filed. But this is why I continuously say that you do not know where this genetic information is going to end up. It could be used in the future against you. Like if there's a bunch of genetic information talking about like medical conditions, for example, things that are going to be very expensive to treat in the
Mhm.
future, and that information gets leaked and becomes public knowledge and is shown everywhere and whatever, like would it be illegal for insurance companies to like raise someone's rates or deny them coverage based on that like data that had been breached, like saying that someone's about to become very expensive to insure? I don't know, but it freaks me out to the point that like
Right.
I would never get one of these tests unless I absolutely had to,
Right.
for medical reasons. But like just doing it for the sake of like putting the information in the trust of a company, it's frightening to know that not only are there like false positives and things that are like draw people into investigations based on the amount of information that's shared with law enforcement, also just the possibility that these companies leak your data and then have sensitive, potentially sensitive medical data out there is something that I would not feel comfortable with at all. And that's why there's lawsuits.
Yeah, this is one of those areas where technology is moving so fast that the lawmakers can't keep up. But I anticipate probably, I mean, maybe this will be the one, but there's got to be privacy law written around this to help protect from this type of thing. Because again, you'd think it would be sort of from a poison tree. This isn't a criminal case, and I'm not a lawyer, but like you'd think being able to use this would be illegal in some way, but there's no law necessarily against it. Not right now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what's really surprising to me is that there's really, I don't think a lot's going to happen to 23andMe as a result. I think that like maybe really wealthy people being upset about this is going to cause some damage to them, but like
Hmm.
generally when companies hoard data and then like make money off of it and then something bad happens because they didn't protect it well, it seems to be an expected thing nowadays. I'm really struggling to see like companies have been like seriously punished for losing sensitive data, but maybe this will be the tipping point because genetic information isn't your credit card.
Right.
It isn't something that can be changed or replaced or anything. This is like more than your permanent record.
Right.
So like having that kind of data breach is unprecedented. Like it's really something that I like on this scale is not something, not the kind of personal data that's ever really been leaked before like this. So I think it's pretty amazing that yes, as someone in the chat says, the implication that there are scrapers that are custom built to pull data from 23andMe is kind of cyberpunk. Yeah, we are fully in the
Yep.
era of genetic information being heisted online, Leo. So if you end up with a clone of you in the future, this is the beginning of the era where where that
Right.
might be possible.
Here's another great comment too. Opted in by proxy because a relative is so crazy. I mean, you share a lot of genetic material with your relatives. If you have anyone that's done this, like you could have some potential, personal data you've not authorized, an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, something like that. Like,
Yeah, the fact that like a piece of genetic data left by someone in your family could draw you into an investigation is
right.
wild to me. Like the de facto opt-in, where somebody else in your family opts in, and now their genetic profile, which is super closely related to yours, is in the system and searchable, and it's just it's crazy to me. Like the fact that like you could leave a hair and they could go and find your mother because like
Right.
she opted into the service, like is pretty wild. Um, Another person says that the contract that they have you sign when you even do medical testing is crazy. They basically just say like, we're going to sell this and use it for studies, like, and you got to deal with it. So yeah, this is probably I think the most shocking story of the week. Just like seeing that this is finally happening. Like I knew this was going to happen. I warned people about like trusting companies with this sort of information if it's not medically necessary. But yeah, the implications of this are numerous. All right, so this is a short one. Ubuntu discovered hate speech and released 23.10, and they pulled it back.
Yeah.
So there was a third-party tool that does like translation, and for the Ukrainian version of the installation translation, they injected swears. They didn't inject code. They didn't inject a virus. They just injected rude swears that nobody liked. So obviously the big concern here is like malware injection. Like
Right.
this was just defacing it, but like if
Yeah.
somebody wanted to like inject malware into the final version of Ubuntu, it seemed like this could have been abused for that as well.
Sure.
I'm actually kind of as much as I don't appreciate the speech, I do appreciate that like it allowed for the discovery of this vulnerability
Sure.
before something more serious happened.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I mean, or even think like as part of a staged loader or something like that, like, read out of this language library to, load code or something to execute on the system or any number of things.
Yeah. So this pretty swiftly resolved, but still something that was a little bit unsettling.
Mhm.
All right, so my friend Angelina really likes talking about drone hacking and hijacking and stuff, and this is going to be a major concern as the military starts utilizing drones. So being able to interrupt the operation of a drone, modify the instructions, or take full control of it is something that people are obviously worried about. So researchers were able to train an AI model that is able to detect man-in-the-middle interception and be able to kind of like tell when someone is injecting or attacking
Mhm.
99% of the time, with false positives occurring in less than 2% of the tested cases. This obviously has implications for drones and other sort of devices that are going to be targeted. So having some sort of active protection in the connection is something that has been considered to be useful for a long time.
Mhm.
You can encrypt it, but also being able to detect someone breaking in and, basically getting through your first
Mhm.
layer of protection and beginning to manipulate things. That's something that is becoming a very interesting topic for anybody operating a remote vehicle.
I mean, even connect this back to the first story we talked about. If some piece of infrastructure in that chain somehow gets compromised, um, that could be all sorts of problems.
Yeah. And these drones are also particularly vulnerable because they are needing to be very easily networked. So
Mhm.
this is something that's probably going to see a lot more attention in the future. Just interesting to note that this sort of attack on drones is becoming increasingly studied and focused on when it comes to defensive technologies. All right. So you might have heard that Signal had a 0 day. There's no evidence of this. CISA has said that there's no evidence of
Mhm.
this. Signal has said there's no evidence of this. If you know about this, email them.
Yeah.
But so far, nobody is confirming this generate link previews thing as being an issue. Yeah, yeah. What are you gonna do? So that's it. That's the whole story.
Right.
There does not seem to be a 0 day vulnerability. Let's move on. All right, so we talked about the Atlassian Confluence server vulnerability. I believe it was 2 weeks ago. And now CISA, the FBI, and MS ISAC. Who is this? Killian, who is this? MS ISAC? Oh, Microsoft something?
Could be, yeah. I'm
I
not
have no idea.
familiar with that.
Whoever you are, don't get mad at me for not knowing who you are. Yes, I'm sure your job is very important since you're in the same byline as these people. But um, yeah, this is something that is now being actively exploited. Low complexity attacks, meaning proof of concepts are out there that can be chained, or that these have been included in other attack tools. That is bad. When you've got something that is low complexity and already kind
Mhm.
of integrated into something that attackers can just use, it means they can chain all sorts of stuff with very low amounts of actual programming knowledge, which means anybody can take a whack at it. So they're basically saying you should just shut it down. The joke that James was making about Cisco's guidance, that is the guidance of the government in this case. Shut it down or isolate them
Mhm.
until you have a chance to update them, because
Yeah.
it's too severe of a threat at this point to have these anywhere connected, because they will be the weakest link in your network. So yeah, this is 1 week after they added the bug to the list of known exploited vulnerabilities. Yes, Microsoft revealed that a Chinese backed threat actor tracked as Storm0062, aka Dark Shadow, or I can't pronounce that, has been exploiting the flaw as a 0 day since at least September 14th, 2023. So this is now in a critical stage where it's not just this one group. It is now a lot of people that are taking
Mhm.
advantage of this. So if you know anyone with the pet Atlassian Confluence server, tell them to update it, or it's going to get very sick.
Before we move on to the next one, Leo had a good comment about the previous story about Signal. The theory is that the link preview is related to the WebP vulnerability that we talked about, I think, 2 weeks ago. Um,
Oh yeah, yeah. We were talking about the how this was being exploited by mercenary spyware groups and how
mhm.
that was the big threat there. That initially this was misreported as like a specific vulnerability in a browser, and then it turned out it was a problem with the library. Yeah, that's. I believe that there was a lot of backdoor stuff going on here, where people were like frantically rushing to patch this and get it out, like before it became widespread knowledge that this was like
Mhm.
a vulnerable library that should be focused on for these sorts of severe attacks. So yeah, it's interesting to see how these really impactful exploited mercenary group
Mhm.
kind of backed pieces of spyware end up driving these frantic
Right.
update pushes. All right, next up. So this is again relatively brief. This is the Red Alert rocket app for Israel, there is obviously going to be a certain amount of targeted in any type of like war situation. We saw this in Ukraine, where people were taking advantage of the sudden rush to look for certain types of information in order to either spread misinformation, do phishing, or other things. In this case, it appears to be a legitimate open source app used by Israeli citizens that is highly popular. However, with that sort of interest, you can expect the exact same thing. Phishing pages going up that allow attackers to have a backdoor version of this. And since it's open source, that means it's probably a little easier for them to take the source code and compile their own version that does malicious stuff. So if you are looking for safety applications, it's always best to download them from official sources. If you just like Google them, often some of the first results could be an ad-supported phishing campaign. And that's something we've seen over and over again. This is just the latest iteration of the same tactic. In this case, taking advantage of the current situation in Israel to try to trick people into searching for and downloading a malicious version of a well-known and relatively, I would say, like very useful thing right now in Israel. So the demand for this application is actually causing attackers to gravitate towards it as a vector for infecting people searching for much needed information. All right, so this is a report on telecommunications companies being breached by Russian sandworm hackers. This has been a concerted effort to go after these telecommunication companies and disrupt them as much as possible. Obviously, that is in Russia's advantage during the war. And it has been mostly phishing attacks, which lead to infiltration and then deployment of a lot of different types of malware that ultimately lead to network disruptions or backups being erased. So these are wiper-style attacks that are literally, nobody's trying to ransomware anyone here. They're just destroying as much as they possibly can, moving laterally across the network, and attempting to cause as much disruption as possible, while also attempting to cripple MikroTik devices. This is something that's to be expected in wartime. This is like cyber war at its most pure in terms of like not trying to hide behind anything other than just the intent to destroy. So obviously, this is a very difficult thing to protect against, as you have like people that are going through a variety of different communication methods, like in wartime. So like phishing attacks tend to be more effective in a chaotic environment. So yeah, there's been a relative amount of success. 11 telecommunications companies that have fallen victim to this particular type of attack. Kansas courts' IT systems are offline after a security incident, which is, it actually just sounds like a ransomware attack, or a wiper. I guess it could still just be a destructive attack. But in this case, given the kind of profile that this fits, everything has gone offline. The Kansas Supreme Court has gone offline. There's one county, I believe, that is still operational. Everything else online is unable to be done. So that's electronic filings or payments. All submissions are not being taken, and they're trying to extend filing dates and make this so that it doesn't impact people too much. But very important things like orders of protection, the ability for new lawyers to enroll with the court, all this stuff. Yes, all of this stuff has been taken down. Case management system, central payment center, online management. If you want to get married, you got to do that in person now. The attorney registration, the appellate case inquiry system, the district court public access portal. This is going to impact tons of services and people's due process, because a lot of this stuff is what like either defendants or attorneys or other people use to get access to their case information. E-filing, all of this is going to impact people's ability to utilize the legal system in the state. So this is, I believe, going to be a pretty big one. They have not responded to any request for comment, but as of yet, I would guess that this is in the negotiation phase of a ransomware attack, if it is in fact one. I'm just speculating here. Nothing's come out that says that, but based on the systems impacted and the likely and just how this is pretty critical, I would go so far as to speculate this looks like some sort of ransomware attack. All right, next up, D-Link is confirming a data breach after an employee phishing attack. However, they're saying that this is an old test environment that wasn't really used recently. It looks like between 2012 and 2013. Some people are speculating that the people leaking this information or offering it for $500 are inflating it by altering timestamps and making it look like it's more
Yeah,
important than it is, and saying that this was a test lab system that was for some reason left for a very long time and probably ended up being vulnerable after not being updated for a
sure.
while or something like that. All right, next up, Quick Trip is kind of saying without saying that their IT outage was caused by a cyber attack. They have
Mhm.
not responded to any request for clarification on that. However, the cyber attack seems to have disrupted their IT systems. They have a chain of 800 convenience stores, which I know them, all over the place, and they employ 35,000 people. So this is their quick rewards program, support systems, phones, and email. Seems like the pumps are still running, so that
Yeah,
seems that I think would be the bigger impact here.
sure.
Um, but they are saying that they are currently working through a network incident that has caused a disruption on some of their systems. Network incident is I don't know. It's not as elegant as perhaps an encryption event, as I've
Sure.
heard other companies refer to as cyber attacks. But it certainly seems as though that is what they are talking about. It says that they've hired security experts. No evidence that data was stolen, but it does seem that it is some sort of attack. So again, like a lot of companies are not being very transparent about what has happened, like when they get hit with these sorts of
Mhm.
attacks. And we kind of have to rely on their statements to see, like, is this just somebody spilled coffee on a very important piece of equipment, or is this something that's like a cybersecurity incident? A lot of the time, I tend to trend towards, like, this is like some sort of like disruption or cybersecurity
Sure.
incident, as opposed to this is just an accident. But we'll see. It does seem like their statements of hiring like a security company does back that up. This one is crazy. All right. So the FBI is warning about extortion groups who are specifically targeting plastic surgery,
Mhm.
like of offices, and then using them to go after the patient. So what's going on is, like, if you go in for like reconstructive surgery or something, they will take all the gross, weird, intimate photos that they have in
Sure.
your medical file there. They will go to your social media accounts and corroborate all this information about your family, your friends, stuff like that, and then they will start sending your family and friends and people like that just like these images, and demand a certain amount of money from you in order to stop doing it. So
Right.
using these sorts of companies as a source of information for a blackmail like fodder
Yeah.
is basically what's going on here. Like, these are
Right.
extortionists who are turning to breaching companies that have large amounts of embarrassing information about people to kind of like go after the victims and not even really target the companies themselves in terms of their
Sure.
primary aspiration. Like, they're looking to make more money off of blackmail, being
Mhm.
cryptocurrency, than off of the plastic surgery companies themselves. So when we talk about like these sorts of breaches of like smaller businesses, like often like it leads to free credit monitoring or whatever,
Sure.
but the impact can be much more direct for victims. It's like free credit monitoring isn't going to do anything in this case.
Right.
So certain types of data, when it's stolen, free credit monitoring is not enough, and it really doesn't compensate in like victims fairly or prepare them for what that information could be used for when a company gets ransomware and chooses not to pay the ransom. It's often not the company that ends up paying the price
Right.
for the data that like they don't pay to prevent being leaked or whatever. So yeah, like, just another way that cyber criminals will find ways of monetizing data and then like proactively go after it once they find a way of monetizing it. This
Mhm.
sort of extortion must have been effective for someone for them to kind of weaponize this approach and use
Right.
it as a systemic way of finding new victims.
I mean, that's a good point that you make too. The sort of the bottom line, I guess, in all of these cyber attacks that we talk about is, I mean, it'll affect the business, who was attacked primarily, but the collateral damage in all of these, the underlying cases, there's going to be victims, hundreds or thousands or millions of victims behind the scenes that are the ones who really suffer from this, when the information is leaked or used for extortion or something like that. And that's the human aspect of all of these cyber attacks that we really need to keep in mind. Like, this is why we do this as cybersecurity professionals.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And how does this attack work? Is it some sort of crazy 0 day? No, they literally make a phone call pretending to be the American Board of Plastic Surgery and try to send them
Mhm.
like a malicious file directly to their office email
Right.
address. That's it. That's the whole scam. And
Very straightforward.
right, and it's like, it has all the elements of a successful social engineering attack.
Mhm.
It's pretty crazy. So this is something that is ongoing. It's been widespread enough that the FBI is issuing alerts, and like plastic surgery offices hopefully now know a bit about this, but they are the primary targets of this extortion attempt, and it seems to be becoming more and more widespread. This is terrible news. I'm going to not spend more than 30 seconds on it. Twister, X, formerly Twitter, is now experimenting with charging new accounts in order to register and post. So if you're trying to create a new Twitter account, X account, then it's going to try to charge you $1. This is mostly in, I think, like the Philippines and one other country
New Zealand, I
that seemed,
think.
yeah, New
Yeah.
Zealand. So I don't know why those people were picked to suffer, but maybe they're just like, we don't care if those people don't come back to X or whatever. But yeah, so if you are looking to create a new account in those territories, then you definitely have to soul search a little bit as to whether or not you want to give Elon Musk $1 for the right
I'll
to not just write on listen to Twitter, but also write on it.
Sure. I'll play devil's advocate for 1 second because I think this is kind of silly too. But like, I get it. Like, there's a lot of disinformation and bots on there. I mean, I don't know how prevalent it is compared to the way that Elon talks about it, but I don't know. I can see. I mean, obviously the cynical nature of me says like this is just a cash grab from whoever to get a free buck, but I can see in a certain aspect why this would make a little bit of sense. But
I
I
just
think
find it funny where it's just like if you're in charge of verifying people's identity and you're just like, okay, I got to figure out who you are, buddy. Give me $1. It's just like of all the ways you could verify who you are, is giving
sure,
you $1 really, really like just paying you a
right.
dollar is really that the best way to do it? Like there's no way for me to get around that system of security, like a whole dollar. Like I'm just like from a security perspective, I'm just like if you need to like hold on, like get a valid credit card or whatever else,
Right.
you don't got to charge it $1. You're just
Yeah.
doing that because you want $1, and I don't want to give you $1, so you don't get my $1.
Here's a counterpoint. James said Troy Hunt went over this, adding a small fee on Have I Been Pwned reduced scammers a lot. Interesting.
Um, I suppose I just don't think that like Twitter's problem, in my opinion, was never that it was being scraped. Twitter's content
Sure.
spreading to other platforms was its strength. People like, and having the infrastructure to deal with that was how Twitter maintained relevancy. By
Right.
trying to make Twitter like exclusive or trying to like prevent Twitter's content from spreading elsewhere, the point of Twitter was that the content spread elsewhere. It spread to
Sure.
the news. It spread to other platforms. It was screenshotted and taken to other places and parodied. Like the fact that the conversation went beyond Twitter was like the whole point. So, yeah, it's silly. Like I think that like as a platform for authenticity, like Twitter and now X has like lost a lot of ground, and that's why I've been using Mastodon a lot more recently. I don't like the fact that I can't upload video clips like easily, but that's really my last big complaint against Mastodon
Mhm.
as a platform. I found a lot of security people have migrated over to it, and I have found myself logging into Twitter less and less often. The thought of paying for something that I already am trying to actively avoid, for like verifying when like the give me $1 technique like doesn't seem to be doing anything about the spread of
Sure.
misinformation on the platform. And I thought today that 75% of misinformation being spread on Twitter is from verified users. Like that's like like okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I will not be paying $1 for Twitter. I guess
Uh,
that's the end of that one.
I don't blame you, and you're probably right.
All right, so next up we have Jupyter Notebook. So what is a Jupyter Notebook? It is a little server that allows you to run Python in order to do big data analysis and all sorts of other stuff. I've used it a lot, and people often use this for like lab environments or other things where they're
Mhm.
working with data. They need to do some number crunching, or even I've seen Jupyter Notebooks used for like AI tasks and stuff like that. So Jupyter Notebooks are now under attack, and it seems to mostly be doing like rootkits, crypto miners, and password stealing scripts. It all seems pretty basic at this point,
Sure.
but this is a basic attack. Like you have people that are spinning up Jupyter Notebooks, generally not doing much to secure them. So if you do run Jupyter Notebooks, I really enjoy Jupyter Notebook. I would maybe run like a Google Colab or something like that. I'm
Mhm.
hoping that that might be a little bit better protected from this sort of thing, rather than running your own Jupyter Notebook and then exposing it.
Sure.
I am only gonna. So we're back to this. If I never see this clip art again, it'll be too soon. So this is an updated version of the Mata backdoor framework. This is previously used by North Korea, and it has more components built in.
Mhm.
The only thing that I thought was kind of newsworthy about this one was it's abusing EDR in attacks, and that's kind of cool.
Mm.
So the fact that it's anticipating endpoint detection and response in these attacks means that, that these hackers are aware of the sorts of tools that are going to be trying to detect them, and they're trying to do things to actively mess with these defensive components. So it'll go ahead and like use kernel, let's see, kernel memory access, I think, to, here we go. All right. So researchers report that the hackers bypass EDR and security tools by using a publicly available exploit dubbed callback hell. Employing the tools, attackers alter
Mhm.
kernel memory and target specific callback routines, which render endpoint security tools ineffective. So basically, they're able to neuter the tools
Mhm.
by altering the kernel memory, which is really interesting. Like knowing that attackers are not just trying to kill antivirus now; they're also going after endpoint detection is a really interesting turn of
Yeah.
events, because you can see that the North Korean backed hackers were like becoming interested in this. So it's unclear what the attribution is here. This was a tool that was used by North Korea before, but other groups can certainly take this over and modify it. And frequently, that's the kind of thing that Five Eyes intelligence groups like to
Mhm.
do, just because it makes attribution that much more difficult.
The
All
only
right,
thing
let's.
I'll say on that, I realize that we're running out of time, is this really goes to the fact that you need defense in depth. I mean, attackers know that you have EDR solutions, they have endpoint controls, and they're going to bypass them. We had a security presentation a few years ago by Yossi Sassy, a security researcher, and he
Hmm.
showed us like in a lab, like I'm not going to say trivial, but it's pretty easy to get around some of these endpoint controls, if you have time and dedication to it, or out of the box tools like this. So defense in depth, everybody.
Yeah, yeah. So we've got a couple more good ones. I'm going to say this is an interesting development. Google has implemented real-time scanning for applications that you download onto your device to make it so that apps that are using polymorphism or downloading additional components after installation get caught. So this is pretty significant because frequently attackers will upload something to the Google Play Store, it'll get scanned, and then it'll still be able to slip through or download
Right.
more components as soon as it's installed that don't get initially scanned. So by adding client-side scanning, it means that we're starting to be able to like look for signs of an attack or malicious behavior after the device has slipped through the Google Play Store. So there are definitely still ways you could get through. For example, if you waited like a week to download the malicious components to the
Right.
application, then that would still be able to get around this sort of thing. But for a lot of the very easy ways that people have been able to get around the Play Store protections in the past, this is no longer going to work. They are going to have to find
Mhm.
new ways of doing it, because during the scan, it should give you a warning and identify behavior that is harmful if you are installing something that has changed itself a little bit since it has gone through the Google Play Store scan. So I think this is going to be pretty effective. Although obviously, like I said, just like choosing a longer window to download malicious components um, would be the way to do it. So there's some ways around this, but it's still a really positive step, and I think it could be really key to reducing the amount of malicious applications that are out there. All right, this is the last one I'm going to cover today. Let's talk about insider threats. Kilian,
Yeah.
you read this one, right?
Yes. Yes.
I actually could not believe this for a second. I had to read this story twice to like fully comprehend like everything that was going on with it. A former U.S. Navy IT manager got a sentence of 5 years and 5 months in prison for illegally obtaining U.S. citizens' personally identifiable information and selling it on the dark web. So, okay, there was a company that was selling database information to the government, and this has not been disclosed which company, but it's lots and lots of personal identifiable information about millions of American people. And this was being offered to qualified like government
Sure.
like agents. So the service, which has not been named, is used by legitimate business and government agencies that require lawful access to run background checks and confirm identity. So this is
Hey,
like not a little bit of information; it's like a lot of information.
well, I was gonna say maybe they should have just charged $1 to confirm the background and identity.
Yeah, just don't even bother with this whole service. Um, so the guy here falsely claimed that the Seventh Fleet, which he served as the chief petty officer, needed access to the database to conduct background checks on Navy personnel. So he misrepresented a business
Hmm.
need and
Sure.
got access to this database. He gave the account to his wife, who went through it with him and found a massive pool of data um, on select individuals over the next 2.5 months. They found sensitive personal information of 9,000 people and sold the data on the dark web in exchange for Bitcoin payments valued at $160,000 at the time. Those purchasing PII from couples leveraged it to commit crimes such as document forgery and bank fraud. Well, obviously, if you had paid this amount of money for that information,
Sure.
you would want to get a return on it. So one individual used the PII to create a fake driver's license and then tried to withdraw money from the
Wow.
victim's bank account. So this is not
That's
like, somebody running credit cards. This is like trying to open bank accounts or like,
bold.
pull information out of someone's account specifically. It's really bold. Hooper then engaged in an unnamed co-conspirator to regain access to the account after losing it by following a similar procedure, offering to pay them $2,500 a month for renting him access to the new account, but the stricter verification procedures preventing the person from completing the task. Absolutely crazy. So when we talk about insider threats, we're frequently focused on people that are disgruntled, that are like leaving or getting fired or something. But frankly, like anybody who finds themselves in a position of opportunity,
Right.
could take advantage of this. And I've been at points in my career when stuff like this has happened to me, where I worked at Uber for a little bit, and they're like, "Hey, here's how to use the system. Here's how to check this out. And if you need to, here's how to go to any individual in our entire system and pull in their information." And see all of their recent all their trips going back to as
Sure.
far as you want. And I was just like, why would I need to do that? I'm like, oh,
Right.
well, you shouldn't. Well, you shouldn't do that. And if you do it, it'll make a little log that you did so. And if anything happens in the future,
Right.
then somebody will go back through that log and they might ask you why. And it's like, that doesn't seem like a lot of that
Right.
doesn't seem like a lot of checks and balances. It seems like if I was crazy, like I could just start looking up very important people's information, and unless there's like a flag or something put on that, then like it seems dangerous in some cases. And that seems to be kind of what happened here. It was like someone was like, all
Right.
right, here's the database. You can check up on basically anyone, but if you do it, it might create a little log and we'll check into it later if something happens. But
Right.
that didn't seem to deter this person from, basically being able to conduct surveillance on these people, and pull up a lot of information about them without any sort of like due process or like any reason for the search, and then just turn around and sell it to
Right.
whoever wanted that information. So the kinds of companies that collect all the sensitive data on individuals and then turn around and sell it often don't have great access controls. We've seen things like police departments who join like a Facebook like network where they're able to access each other's automated license plate data. So like a disgruntled police officer in Kansas could watch all of your movements through the state of California through a portal like this,
Right.
which is pretty scary, like if they don't have a specific reason for doing so. So insider threats continue to be scary. These sorts of attacks where like somebody finds a way to monetize access to what's apparently a legitimate service,
Right.
if a little sketchy in my opinion, are scary because there's not very many ways to protect against this sort of attacks. You just have some guy that has a fake bank account, a fake
Right.
a driver's license, trying to register a bank account as you, or trying to get into your own bank account. And that's something that like is not in a lot of people's like threat playbook.
No.
They're not thinking about that as a potential attack. So pretty wild set of news this week. Thank you also to everybody in the chat. It's been super active today.
Yeah.
Good to see James, Tai Quinn Gong, and everybody else commenting as well. If you guys want to keep up with all of this that's going on, you can always jump into our Discord server. Where is it? Where you can see a lot of great stuff, not only updates about the stream, you can post your questions here, but also some cool stuff that's been created, both hardware projects and software projects. So you can join our Discord server at nugget.lol, nugget.lol. That link usually works. A lot of really cool and awesome people have been in this chat saying hello recently, sharing things that I often go over on the chat and also on the stream, and also just kind of like answering each other's questions. So really cool community. I'm really pleased that we managed to build that since we've started doing the stream and including it there. And of course, we can't just talk about our community without mentioning our sponsor, Varonis. So Varonis lets us work on this every week. We're also actually able to start doing these new cutouts. I think you guys have seen the new videos we've been releasing every week. We're going to start doing that more. My hope is that we can get to the point where we are releasing a video every day for you guys. So stay tuned
Nice.
over the next month or so. Like that is the goal, is to have like new content out all the time. And if you missed the stream, you should be able to see some cutouts of the best segments from each of the stream as like 1 or 2 minute videos that should be pretty easy to watch. So yeah, if you want to, sorry, I almost forgot. If you want to support the stream, you can always go to varonis.com/Kody. That's Kody. Am I sharing my screen? I'm not. There we go. That's varonis.com/Kody. That'll let everyone at Varonis know that you appreciate the stream and you want us to keep doing it. So this week we have our data risk assessment. As Link, we had actually another thing that I was promoting very heavily. That was like a cool Salesforce attack thing that I was talking about last week. Slightly postponed. The researchers there are in Israel, so we're gonna let them chill for a little bit before like we ask them to do like a highly technical demo like live. So stay tuned for next week. We'll talk about when that demo is going up. But I'm actually really excited about it because it is based on the Salesforce CTF that I got to do at Black Hat, and I've showed up on the stream. So if you're interested in how people can hack into Salesforce and do all sorts of interesting stuff, we'll talk more about it on the next stream on probably Wednesday. All right, so that is all the time we have this week, and then some. I think we're like 20 minutes over, but there was so much news this week, and it was a lot of fun. So, thank you to Kilian, of course. Thank you to everybody in the chat. We'll see you next week, everyone.
Take care. Have a great one.
Bye.